This is how they win. They look at the brain-dead suppression of the West to achieve an illusion that silver is cheap so they can continue to fund the beast of the military-industrial complex and the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wars that we've been involved in, or they have been involved in terms of supplying munitions for the last several years. It's the key to it all. Why would it be omitted? Why don't they talk about it? Why are these banks as dumb as a mud wall in a rainstorm suppressing silver at a time when all of these other governments are buying it? What is different now than in all of my career is that over the last few years, you have countries and sovereign wealth funds standing for delivery. They never did that before. 1% or less stood for delivery. Now they all do. This is how they win. Thank you very much. I don't care about positive real yield. I don't care about the strong dollar. I don't care about any of these relationships. Just give me the silver. And if you look at the drawdown in the LBMA silver vault, it's like a ski hill straight down, right? And the same thing is true, only slower, on COMEX, and the same thing is true right now on the Shanghai Metals Exchange.
Did you know that central banks are repatriating their gold from the New York Fed at unprecedented rates? Andy Schectman reveals how BRICS nations are now standing for delivery of precious metals, draining Western gold and silver vaults and moving them to China. This strategic move is highlighted by the steep decline in LBMA silver vaults, with similar trends on COMEX and the Shanghai Metals Exchange. A little-known contract by the CME Group allows for COMEX futures to be delivered to BRICS Hong Kong and then transported to the Shanghai Metals Exchange. This coordinated effort by BRICS nations leverages trillions in precious metals to challenge the dominance of the US economy. Schectman emphasizes that this unprecedented coordination in buying and offloading gold and silver is designed to undermine the US dollar and financial stability. With silver demand soaring, especially for military, green, and electronic applications, and suppression efforts waning, we could witness a dramatic shift in global financial power. As gold prices potentially rise above $2,500, the value of silver is set to surge, making it the investment of a generation.
The drawdown in supply, really, from the LBMA, who tells us it's the second lowest amount of silver that the the London Bullion Market Association, don't want to say LME, the LBMA, because they're different. The London Metals Exchange, the Chinese own, and those are the base metals. The LBMA would be the silver and gold and whatnot. And they tell us it's the second lowest amount of silver they've had in their inventory since they started keeping records. It's a 140-year-old institution. We've seen massive drawdowns out of the COMEX, off the ETFs, and even out of the Shanghai Metals Exchange. It's very interesting that when you look at the price, currently there are 8 banks, 8, that hold the largest concentrated short position of any commodity ever traded in the history of the COMEX market. Why? Why would 8 banks be stepping on the price of silver that much? Or the LBMA, who tells us they trade 290 million ounces of silver per day, but say that those numbers are 10% understated, 10 times understated from what is actually traded, just the settlement numbers, but the trading is 10 times greater. That would say 2.9 billion ounces of silver is traded in London per day. That's 3.5 times annual global mine supply. Now, the LBMA says they're very low on silver. They have 800 million ounces, period, of which over 500 million belong to the ETFs, leaving 300 million ounces there, yet they're trading close to 3 billion ounces per day. So between the 8 banks on COMEX, which control the largest concentrated short position in any commodity ever traded, or the LBMA, which is trading up to 3.5 times annual global mine supply every day, should tell you that the real price for silver is, well, heck, no one knows what it is. And when you see central banks like India, who in the last 2.5, 3 years has bought over 700 million ounces of silver, and already here in 2024 bought more silver than they did all of 2023 in the first 4 months of the year, and now bought a whole bunch of silver recently, billions of dollars worth, from the United Arab Emirates, because they have some deal in trade with them where they don't have to pay as big of an import duty. Silver is something that is a strategic asset, not an industrial, as all of us want or are told should be. But as far as I'm concerned, it is the drawdown and the accumulation by the biggest money in the world. I want to read something to you. The Silver Institute publishes numbers, and those numbers have showed a 250 million ounce or so shortfall in between supply and demand over the last few years each year. And so, in other words, there's more demanded than is coming to market. And when you look at the supply-demand numbers out of the Silver Institute, what they say is the demand is industrial, electric and electronics, of which photovoltaics, that's, solar panels, other industrial, photography, jewelry, silverware, and that's it. And it was a subcommittee of the Committee on Banking and Currency of the United States Senate. And it is S.2768, a bill to authorize the use of silver for war purposes of silver held or owned by the United States. S, as in Saturday, .2768. Present consumption of silver for war purposes is at the rate of about 100 million ounces per year and is growing rapidly. According to the War Production Board, it is only a matter of months before war demands will have increased sufficiently to require at least 200 million ounces of silver per year. Now, he talks, John Little does, about the massive amount of silver used in all this high-tech weaponry. I have a client who is a consultant for the Department of Defense, and 2 years ago in Vancouver at BRICS, I made a statement that there's 500 ounces in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. And he came up to me and he said, I work for the DOD. I helped design the Patriot and the Tomahawk. I know there's silver in it, don't know how much. I'll get back to you. Never heard from him again. I see him this last year in January, and he says, I'll be damned, you were right. There is between 13 and 14 kilograms of silver in the tip of a Tomahawk. And he says, he shows me all sorts of pictures that he said were just, that had been declassified and all sorts of stuff. But my point to you is this. In 1942, we were on the verge of using 200 million ounces of silver per year, and for military applications. And now we're supposed to believe that with all the high-tech weaponry, that there's no silver in it. The Silver Institute omits completely and totally military demand. So we have a situation where, ask yourself, why would 8 Western commercial banks suppress the price the way that they do? The largest suppression, the largest concentrated short position in any commodity traded is in silver. The largest. Silver, we are told, is used in military, but they conveniently stopped talking about that and stripped it out of the supply-demand fundamentals. The military-industrial complex is pretty damn powerful. Maybe more powerful than the present, probably so, probably pulling the strings, the people up there. Do you think they want silver to build all of the missiles that they are selling all around the world and or to the US or to the rest of the world? Do you think they need it? And if silver were really known to be so integral to military applications, do you think it would be as cheap as it is? Do you think there's any coincidence that India has bought, literally going on, if you add what they bought from United Arab Emirates and what they bought from the West, from what they told us, you're getting close to a billion ounces of silver in the last 3 or 4 years. China is the largest producer of silver. You don't ever hear them talking about it, but they are, number 2. Mexico's number 1, China number 2. Silver is the trade of a generation. It is the value of a generation. And if it weren't for these Western banks that are holding down the price, it would go parabolic. Now, what's different? What is different right now is that you, for the very first time, have sophisticated, coordinated, and wealthy governments acting maybe through, by proxy, through sovereign wealth funds and bullion banks that are draining the exchanges of the LBMA and the COMEX and backdooring out of the ETFs and even the Shanghai Metals Exchange. And they are loading up on gold and silver. But in terms of silver, this is how they win. They look at the brain-dead suppression of the West to achieve an illusion that silver is cheap so they can continue to fund the beast of the military-industrial complex and the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wars that we've been involved in, or they have been involved in terms of supplying munitions, for the last several years, it's the key to it all. Why would it be omitted? Why don't they talk about it? Why are these banks as dumb as a mud wall in a rainstorm suppressing silver at a time when all of these other governments are buying it? What is different now than in all of my career is that over the last few years, you have countries and sovereign wealth funds standing for delivery. They never did that before. 1% or less stood for delivery. Now they all do. This is how they win. Thank you very much. I don't care about positive real yield. I don't care about the strong dollar. I don't care about any of these relationships. Just give me the silver. And if you look at the drawdown in the LBMA silver vault, it's like a ski hill, straight down, right? And the same thing is true, only slower, on COMEX, and the same thing is true right now on the Shanghai Metals Exchange. So these countries are buying Western gold and silver, having it delivered to China, and offloading it off of the exchanges. There is a contract that most people don't know about that was written by the CME Group in 2015 that allows for COMEX futures to be delivered in exchange for physical to BRICS Hong Kong, which is a COMEX facility, where then that stuff is picked up by a truck and driven to the Shanghai Metals Exchange, where it's offloaded to all of the countries that are buying and taking delivery of metals, including the PBOC. Silver is the value of a generation. You have to have strong fingertips. But this Western suppression, which has been going on for a long time, never had these countries coordinated, sophisticated, wealthy enough, cunning enough to stand for delivery. But they are, and it is the Achilles heel. It's one of these deals where we will wake up one day. If gold continues, if gold gets above 2,500 and climbing, you'll see silver, bang, take off. They can't continue to hold it down. And I think this is just the very beginning. So it's the value of a generation. I mean that in my soul. There are very few assets that are depleting in nature. Keith Neumeyer will tell you it's coming out of the ground at 7-1. After 5,000 years of it coming out of the ground at 16-1. Because it's held in nature in a form called epithermal, like your skin is epidermis, epithermal, right at the surface. Big deposits were gone long time ago. So it's needed in military, in green, in digital, in electronics, and it's experienced a monetary renaissance. And yet we're supposed to believe that it's coming out of the ground at 7-1, but it should be valued at 80-1. So God's ratio says 7-1, man's price in the West says 80-1.